She had saved a wounded Comanche from a posse of ranchers. The next day, his warriors surrounded her house. The sun was a hammer on the New Mexico dust, turning every breath Clara McKee took into grit. The sky was a sheet of white so bright it bled the color from the world, but she didn't stop. The bucket on her hip sloshed, nearly empty from the half-dried creek she had walked a mile to reach. Water had become her second religion, something earned, never gifted. She was halfway home when she saw him. At first, she mistook him for just another carcass. A coyote maybe, or something the buzzards hadn't yet picked clean. Then she saw it. The rise and fall of a chest, ragged and shallow. Her steps slowed. Her heart lurched sideways. He was young, barely a man, his skin the color of old copper, black hair matted to his face with blood and dirt. The snapped shaft of an arrow jutted from his thigh. His shirt was torn, revealing muscle and bone. His lips were cracked, his eyes closed. The dust around him was soaked a dark, drying brown. Her father's voice echoed from a memory she'd tried to bury. "You see one of them alone, girl. He's bait. The rest ain't far." But her feet were rooted to the spot. She crouched slowly, clutching the bucket, and pressed her other hand to his neck. A pulse, weak but there. A small animal groan escaped him as she shifted his head. It wasn't dangerous, just alive. She tipped the bucket and let a few precious drops of water trickle onto his lips. He flinched, then swallowed. His eyelids fluttered. He muttered something. Not English, not Spanish. Comanche, maybe. A prayer or a curse. That was when the horses came. The thud of hooves rose fast behind her. 6 riders, faces half hidden by bandanas, rifles slung low. Dust and sweat clung to their coats. Tucker rode at the front, a man with a voice like coal scraped on metal and a temper as mean as a rattler. "Miss McKee," he drawled, reining in. His eyes flicked to the man at her feet. "Well now, ain't this a surprise?" Clara stood slowly, her body tense. "He's dying." "He's Comanche," Tucker snapped. "Killed 2 men back near Dry Creek. Shot him in the back. Bastard ran and left his brothers behind." She didn't move. One of the men laughed. "Let her save him. He'll gut her before the sun sets." Tucker leaned forward in his saddle, his face hard. "You help him, Clara, and you're a traitor. Might as well paint your face red and take up a tomahawk." Clara's jaw tightened. "He's bleeding to death." "Then let him." Tucker shifted his rifle. "Unless you want us to finish it for you." She stared him down. "You raise that rifle again on my land, Tucker. I swear to God I'll put you in the ground next to him." The silence that followed stretched tight and brittle. One of the younger men muttered, "Ain't worth it." Tucker spat into the dirt. "You always were a fool for lost causes." He turned his horse with a jerk and galloped off, the others following in his wake. Clara waited until their dust settled back to earth. Only then did she drop to her knees beside the young man. "You better be worth it," she muttered, pulling the scarf from her neck to wrap around his leg. Her hands shook, but she worked like a woman who had run out of choices. The arrow had to stay for now. She'd learned that much when her husband came back with one in his shoulder. He died anyway, not from the wound, but from the fever that followed. "Damn you," she whispered, hauling the man over her shoulder. "You're heavier than you look." Every step home was an agony. Her back screamed, her arms trembled, her legs buckled more than once. But she kept going, one dragging step after another, until her cabin came into view, a squat, sun-scorched shelter that had outlasted her marriage, and longer still her hope. Inside, she kicked the rug aside and opened the cellar hatch. Cool air rose to greet her like a sigh. "I'll regret this," she muttered, easing him down into the dark. "But not today." She tossed down a blanket, a tin of salve, and a canteen before closing the hatch. Only when she bolted the trap door did her knees give out. She slumped against the wall, lungs burning. Outside, the wind stirred the dust. Inside, Clara McKee stared at the door, rifle across her lap, and whispered to no one, "I hope you live, Comanche, because I just bet everything I have on you." The cellar was dark and cool, smelling of earth and onions, the kind of scent that clung to roots and secrets. Clara lit a small oil lamp, its glow pushing back the shadows. The Comanche lay motionless on a cot, his skin slick with sweat. The arrow still jutted from his thigh, the flesh around it angry and red. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling. She'd brought boiled water, clean rags, whiskey for the wound, and thread she hadn't touched since she'd last tried to mend something that refused to hold together. He didn't stir as she cut the fabric away. Only when she poured whiskey over the torn flesh did he groan, a low sound caught between pain and warning. His eyes fluttered open, dark, unfocused, and wild. "It's all right," she said softly, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. "You're safe, for now." He didn't answer. She set her jaw and went back to work, cleaning around the arrowhead, packing the wound, and wrapping it as tight as she dared. When she was done, she wiped the sweat from her brow. "You gonna talk?" she asked, not expecting a reply. "Or just stare at me like I'm the one in the wrong?" His gaze remained wary, watchful. "You don't have to thank me," she muttered. "Just don't try to kill me when you can stand again." That night, she slept by the trap door, rifle within reach. Near midnight, a sound from the cellar woke her, a whisper, repeated in a voice as dry and cracked as old paper. "Nokomi." She sat up, listening. The voice came again, soft and low. "Nokomi." She didn't know the word, but something in the way he said it, like a prayer or a name, settled a strange calm in her chest. By morning, his fever had broken. She went down with a cup of broth and found him awake, his eyes clearer now, following her movements. He didn't speak, but when she handed him the cup, his fingers brushed hers, and for the first time he held her gaze without suspicion. He drank slowly. When he finished, he handed the cup back with both hands, a gesture that was deliberate, careful, respectful. A silent gratitude passed between them. The morning light was still pale when she heard the hooves. Not one or two, many. A soft, deliberate procession. She crossed to the window. They came like shadows rising from the earth itself. More than a dozen Comanche warriors on horseback, silent as the wind, spreading into a wide, menacing circle around her cabin. Feathers stirred in their hair, rifles lay across their laps. They did not shout or draw their weapons, but their presence pressed down on the world like a gathering storm. At their head rode a man older than the rest, his back straight, his face a map of sun and war. Silver streaked his braids. His eyes, sharp and deep-set, were utterly unreadable. He was not just a leader, he was a reckoning. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. She grabbed her rifle and stepped outside. her boots crunching on the dry ground. She kept the rifle pointed down but close. Raising her chin, she called out, "You came for him." The leader, Maha, dismounted with the grace of a man who'd never known fear. He took 2 steps forward, his hands empty. "We came for our blood," he said, his voice low and rich with warning. Clara held her ground. "You're too late if you came to bury him." Maha's eyes narrowed. "I found him bleeding in the dirt," she continued, her voice steady. "An arrow in his leg, half dead from the sun. Your people left him." A murmur stirred among the warriors. Maha studied her the way a hawk studies its prey. "I dragged him here," Clara said. "I cleaned the wound. I fed him. He's breathing because I didn't listen to the men who wanted him dead." From beneath the house, a muffled groan was unmistakable. The eyes of every warrior shifted toward the floorboards behind her. Clara didn't flinch. "He's alive," she said, "but he's not ready to ride." Maha stepped closer. "You keep him like a prisoner." "I kept him like a man who would have died without me." She stood firm. "I didn't bring him here to trade." Another murmur passed through the warriors. Maha looked past her, at the thin ribbon of smoke rising from her chimney, then turned and spoke in his own tongue. His men responded with curt, slow nods. Clara couldn't understand the words, but she knew their meaning. Judgment. Debate. Maha turned back to her. "You say you saved him," he said at last. "Then you will watch over him, until he speaks, until he chooses." Her breath caught. She nodded once. He turned and mounted his horse, but they did not ride away. They dismounted, forming a silent perimeter. They were not hostile, not friendly. They were waiting. They would not leave without their brother. And Clara realized she wasn't just sheltering one man anymore. She was standing in the middle of something far bigger than herself. On the second morning, Maha returned to her doorstep. "He's not ready," Clara said, her voice firm. Maha's expression was stone. "He is our blood. We take care of our own. You left him to die." "He chose to fight," Maha countered. "He accepted the risk." Clara swallowed. "Maybe so, but I won't let you take him just to finish what the desert started." His gaze sharpened. "You think we kill our wounded?" "I don't know what you'll do," she said honestly. "That's the point." The silence between them stretched. A test of will. At last he gave a curt nod. "One more day. Then we speak again." That night, she brought a fresh bandage and a bowl of warm water to the cellar. The man she now knew as Koa was propped on one elbow, his skin pale but no longer feverish. As she knelt and began to unwrap his thigh, his voice came low and rough. "So are you." She blinked. "What?" "Stubborn." His voice was hoarse from disuse. "You have a stubborn will." "English now?" she asked, surprised. He nodded once. "Some." "Good. I'm tired of talking to myself." A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. Then his gaze grew serious, searching her face. "Why?" he asked. She paused her work. "Why what?" "Why save me?" Clara sat back on her heels. "You were dying," she said after a moment. That was enough. Koa studied her. "That simple?" "No," she admitted, running a hand through her hair. "But it's the best I've got." She found herself adding, "My husband was killed 5 years ago. A cattle skirmish. One of those fights where no one's wrong but everyone bleeds." He watched her, his expression gentle. You think I am him? She shook her head. No, I used to believe the world was simpler. Good men and bad. Yours and ours. Now, now I think we're all just guessing until it's too late. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, softly but clearly, I am not the man who killed your husband. I know, she whispered, and was surprised to find she meant it. Their eyes held, not as enemies, but as two people finding common ground in the dust. The next day, just before noon, a long finger of dust rose against the hard blue sky, curling like smoke over the ridge. Clara squinted, her heart tightening as shapes took form. Horses, rifles, Tucker, they were back. She sprinted to the cabin, slammed the door, and grabbed her rifle. When she stepped back outside, 7 riders thundered into her yard, Tucker in the lead, his face red with sweat and fury. Well, I'll be damned, Tucker called, pulling his horse to a stop. Look at this little frontier queen, standing tall. His eyes scanned the silent woods. He's still in there? Your war prize? He sneered. Tell me, Clara, you become his woman yet? Or are you just keeping him warm till his brothers come to cut your throat in your sleep? The men laughed, an ugly, mean sound. Turn around, Tucker, Clara said, her voice low. You have no right to be here. Tucker's smile vanished. We've got every right. We're not about to let one of theirs play possum in our territory. He kicked his horse forward. I heard things, that you're not just sheltering him, you're talking to him. Clara stepped into the center of the yard. Leave, she said. Now. One of the men raised his rifle. She's bluffing. A rustle answered from the trees. From the edge of the woods, from behind the cabin, from the brush beside the barn, silent figures emerged like wraiths. Maha's warriors. Their rifles were raised, but not aimed. They were watching, surrounding, waiting. Tucker stiffened. Well, look at that. Brave little beasts. The air drew tight as a wire. Clara's voice cut through it. I will not let blood spill on my land, unless I am given no other choice. Tucker turned his glare on her. You really picked your side, didn't you? I didn't pick a side, she snapped. I chose to save a life. You came here to kill. Maha stepped out from behind the cabin, walking slowly, without fear. His warriors fanned wider. Tucker's hand dropped to his holster. Before he could draw, Clara's rifle was up, the stock pressed firm against her shoulder. Her voice cracked like a whip. Try it, she dared him. I dare you. Tucker stared at her, then at the silent ring of warriors, then back at the lone woman who stood between two worlds. The wind picked up, swirling dust around their feet, and for a long moment, no one moved at all. A loose shutter slapped against the cabin, a frantic wooden heartbeat in the tense quiet. You aiming that rifle at me, Clara? Tucker's voice was a low growl. I'm aiming it at the man who'd make me dig another grave in this hard dirt. They stood locked in a long, painful silence. Then, from the shadowed doorway behind her, Koa appeared. He was pale and limping, but he stood upright. He said nothing, but the sight of him, not a ghost, not a corpse, but a man made of stubborn flesh and an unbreakable will, sent a ripple of doubt through Tucker's men. Tucker spat, the sound a curse on the dry earth. This ain't over. No, Clara said, her voice steady, but maybe it never should have started. He wrenched his horse around, a snarl twisting his face. One day, girl, You'll wish you'd let him bleed." The posse thundered away in a storm of hooves and dust. As the air cleared, Clara slowly lowered her rifle. Maka stepped to her side, his gaze impossible to read. "You fight for him?" he asked. She turned, her eyes finding Koa, who steadied himself against the doorframe. "I fight for peace," she said, "but if I have to stand between two sides with a gun to keep it, then so be it." Maka gave a single, sharp nod. It wasn't approval or praise. It was recognition. Clara was no longer just a settler. She had become a border, a line drawn in the dust that no one would cross lightly. It started with a sound like a bone snapping, sharp, final. A gunshot shattered the stillness, the echo ricocheting off the rocks like a thunderclap. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then chaos ripped it open. Smoke plumed from a settler's rifle, the bullet kicking up dust inches from Maka's feet. The response was immediate. The warriors moved as one, a storm of wind and fire, melting into the brush with a terrifying grace. The air turned to a symphony of ruin, barking rifles, screaming horses, and the raw shouts of men. Thought was a luxury she couldn't afford. Clara dropped behind a woodpile, her hands shaking as they found a cartridge and rammed it home. The crack of gunfire was a physical blow, yet through it, she heard her name, spat like an insult. Traitor. The word meant nothing now. Her eyes found Koa by the doorway, gripping the wall. He was still weak, but his eyes were sharp, alert. The scent of blood had brought him back to life. Clara raised her head and fired. A settler ducked a fraction too late. Her bullet tore the brim from his hat. Return fire splintered the wood above her, stinging her face with shards. She wiped her cheek, smearing blood and dust. To her left, Maka directed a flanking charge with silent hand signals, his voice a low, urgent command. The Comanche moved like a single organism, flowing between cover, fearless. Then, a cry, sharp and close. Clara's head snapped around. A settler, breaking from the trees, rifle leveled at Koa's unprotected side. There was no time for aim, only instinct. She scrambled to her feet, heart seizing in her throat, and fired. The shot threw the man backward, his own rifle spinning uselessly to the ground. Clara stood frozen, smoke curling from the barrel, her breath coming in ragged bursts. Koa stared at her, not with fear or anger, but with a profound recognition. She had drawn blood for him. There was no going back. Another shot cracked the air, and a hot, searing line of pain tore across her upper arm. The impact sent her sprawling into the dirt. Before she could rise, a shadow fell over her. Koa. He was crawling, dragging his wounded leg, his face a mask of agony, but his eyes were blazing. He reached for her rifle. She handed it to him. Together, they pressed against the cabin wall. He loaded, aimed, and fired, the weapon a part of him. She saw the pain that twisted his features, but saw, too, the fire that refused to be extinguished. This was no myth, no enemy, just a man fighting for every breath, fighting for her. The settler's charge faltered. It began with one man dropping his rifle and running. Then another dragged his wounded friend from the fight. Tucker, clutching a bleeding shoulder, roared a final, broken curse before vanishing into the trees. And then, silence. A sudden, ringing quiet that was louder than the gunfire. Smoke drifted like low-lying fog, carrying the bitter perfume of gunpowder and blood. Clara sat in the dirt, her torn dress stained, her face streaked with soot. Koa slumped beside her, his breathing shallow, but he was alive. He looked at her. She looked at him. No words were needed. She had crossed a line, not by accident, but by choice. With powder on her hands and fire in her heart, she had claimed her place. Slowly, he reached for her hand. Their fingers met, tangled in blood and dust, and held. The battlefield lay quiet. Empty shell casings glinted in the dirt. Maka approached, his steps slow on the cracked earth. He stood over Clara, a long shadow in the dying light. "You fight like one of my own," he said. It was not a compliment. It was a statement of fact. Clara gave a shaky laugh. "I don't know what I fight like anymore." Maka crouched, his eyes sharp. "You know what comes next." She met his gaze. "More men. More guns." He nodded. "Your people will not forgive this." "I never asked them to. They will call you an outcast, a traitor." "I've been called worse," she said, "by better men." A flicker of something, almost a smile, touched Maka's lips. He rose, looking toward the tree line where his warriors waited. Koa limped toward them, her rifle slung over his shoulder. In his eyes, something was unbroken. He knelt beside her, so close she could feel the heat of his skin. Without a word, he reached for her hand. His touch was careful, almost reverent. "No one survives a fire without scars," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But we survived." He squeezed her hand. "You kept us alive." Maka watched them, his arms crossed. "You have no home here now, Clara McKee," he stated. She looked up at him, tired but calm. "Maybe I never did." A long silence stretched between them. Then Maka spoke, his voice heavy with significance. "Then come with us. Leave this place and their war. Come west, where a person is measured by their spirit, not their blood." It was not a command. It was an invitation, a way forward. She looked at Koa, who still held her hand. He offered no plea, only the steady promise in his eyes. She thought of the splintered wood of her home, of the fresh grave in the yard, of the loneliness that had been her only companion for so long. Slowly, using his arm for support, she rose. "All right," she said. It was not a surrender. It was an answer. The rising sun found them moving west. Behind her, the cabin was a scar on the horizon, a place shed like old skin. She did not look back. Koa rode beside her, his back straight, his eyes on the far hills. The air between them was filled with everything that had been said in gunfire and in silence. This was not a retreat. It was a return. The land began to change, the flat plains yielding to rolling hills and canyons of red stone. The farther they rode, the quieter the world became. There was only the wind, the soft rhythm of hooves, and the cry of a hawk circling a vast, empty sky. That evening, by the low light of a campfire, Koa came to her. He knelt, holding a small, intricate necklace of polished bone and red stone. He said nothing, but his eyes spoke volumes. It was not a promise made in a church, but one forged in fire and sealed in survival. With infinite care, he tied it around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin, a touch that sent a shiver through her, not of fear, but of profound recognition. She placed her hand over the cool stone, then covered his. In the firelight, Their eyes met. It was enough. Later, beneath a blanket of stars so bright up they seemed to crackle in the silence, she knew she was no longer running. She had not been cast out. She had chosen a new path. They had not survived simply to return to the world they knew, but to build something new from its ashes. And here, in the vast, wild quiet, where names and pasts no longer mattered, that was more than enough. It was everything. Out here, survival is earned, love is not given, but forged, and peace is a choice made one weary step at a time. Clara did not ride back to a world that had betrayed her. She rode forward, toward a future that cared only for who she chose to be. And Koa, he spoke his love not in words, but in quiet loyalty, in shared silence, in the steady warmth of his hand in hers. If this story of love born from dust and danger stirred something in you, then you have found your home. Subscribe to Wild West Hearts for more tales of fierce devotion, forbidden love, and romance that blazes its own trail. Click the bell, and never miss a story where the greatest risks are taken for the heart. Wild West Hearts, where love is the last untamed frontier.